And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And I had the pleasure of joining Viva Frei on his show a couple of weeks ago. Could be months ago. Time flies when you're having fun. And it's great to have him join us today. Viva, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I think I would dare say it might have even been several months ago because I think it was it in 2024 or was it 2025?
It probably was
I
2024.
I think it's months ago, but I mean, and what has happened in the world since then? It's
It
a
feels
different.
like yesterday. It really does. So it flies past.
Yeah, it's good to be on.
It's great to have you. And we're going to look at all things free speech, your background, obviously, back in Canada, and then obviously you're in the US at the moment. And people, if they're not following you, there is your handle, your X, your Twitter handle. They can follow your many musings and videos
I
and
say if they
comments.
have sensitive ears, they might want to stick to the video content and not the Twitter content. And questioning whether or not I'm dropping one too many f bombs these days, but the I don't know. And it's questionable how you deal with people who have no shame when they need public shaming.
I
But
agree. I agree. It's a balancing act, and I haven't seen you cross the line. But hey, that could change in the next week. Who knows? But you're a former lawyer there in Canada. You've been a political candidate for the People's Party of Canada. We've had Maxime Bernier on ages ago. I need to reach out to him. So
well, there might be another a federal election sooner than later. Although I'm skeptical that it'll be sooner than later. But this year, there's got to be an election unless they declare martial law.
this, well, unless they declare martial law, you've heard it here first. Unless
Hey, they've learned. I mean, I'm sure everybody's learned the wrong lessons from Ukraine, and they've learned the wrong lessons from Romania. So, yep, People's Party of Canada. I ran for the People's Party of Canada in 2021. I was a commercial litigator for over a decade, near 13 years. I mean, technically, it was 2007. I voluntarily relinquished my license, my bar license, in say 2023, after having come down to Florida because I was paying $3,000 a year with no expectation of practicing anymore. I wasn't practicing, and all that people did was file ethics complaints because they didn't like my tweets. And so I was like, I'm financing a bar association to continue to investigate me for exercising free speech. Like, no threats. I once tweeted out that Justin Trudeau is responsible for, something about in Canada they've murdered 10,000 people in 2022, referring to euthanasia or medical assistance in dying. Someone files a complaint, and I get a call from the Bar Society, and I'm talking to the guy. I was like, that number's 100% accurate, right? He's like, well, technically Justin Trudeau didn't kill them. It's like, oh, would you like me to tweet out a clarification that Trudeau didn't kill them individually? He's like, yeah, that would help. So I was like, all right, great. Do a follow-up tweet. It's like, just for clarity, Justin Trudeau did not individually euthanize each one of those 10,000 Canadians. Had he done that at an hour a person, it would have taken more than a year. So yeah, that's people have got into the habit of using what they think is the ultimate leverage of a license to practice over someone's head to silence their free speech.
but tell us what got you into the legal side. Why did you decide to follow that in Canada?
In Quebec in particular, I'm born and raised in Montreal, studied. I mean, I did my philosophy undergrad, honors philosophy at McGill. Then I did my law degree in Quebec, Ville de Quebec at Université Laval.
I remember going to Montreal whenever I was like 13. I remember going to Montreal and I got to the border from the US. We were in Maine and then went over. Uh, they spoke to us in French. We spoke English, and it was like disdain. How dare you speak to us in
It
English?
was if you
That was
crossed
my
over
only recollection.
if you crossed from Maine to Quebec, then you must have crossed at the Sherbrooke-ish crossing, and I mean, it's a beautiful place geographically, and culturally, it's beautiful as well. Politically, it's turned into a living hellscape. No, but say from a family of lawyers, my dad's a lawyer. We're five kids. Four of the five of us turned out to be lawyers. And so there was no pressure, no nothing. It's just a foregone conclusion. You get an undergrad degree and a degree that teaches you how to think, and then you go into a professional degree. And I had already sort of not followed through with enough of the sciences to become a doctor, so lawyer was the next logical thing. And I practiced for a long period of time. I just never liked the practice of law. It's pushing paper. It's endless stress, endless procedure, and ultimately you end up still feeling very vapid, even if you're making a decent living. And so I was at a big law firm for 5 years as a student, intern, and young lawyer. Had my first kid, had something of a first midlife crisis, quit, and thought I was going to go study commercial photography at Dawson College. Before I could get rejected from my application there, I was on a waiting list. People started calling me and say, "Hey, Viva, did you just?" Or I was David at the time. I was like, "Did you just quit and you're practicing on your own?" I was like, "Well, I'm not really practicing." He's like, "Well, what do you charge?" It's like, oh, $150 an hour, which is like dirt cheap for a lawyer. And then within a couple of months, I had built up a small practice, and then I did that for about 10 years. But that never got better anyhow, and I never felt better doing what I was doing. And there was a big transition from giving up the practice to going into marketing and internet, and then found my ikigai in legal online commentary, and that's how I, found this magical place that I can make a living and do what I like doing in life.
Tell me about what's the legal situation in Canada, because Canada leans more to the left generally, certainly politically. How does that? h- Is it possible to have a free legal system that believes in freedom for the individual and freedom of speech? Is that possible in Canada, or has that not yet been invented?
It's I don't know if it's possible anywhere. Like once you have licensure as a criteria for admission, you're going to be held to the standards or dictates of those who control licensing. I practiced in Quebec. Canada has two systems: common law, civil law. Quebec is the Napoleonic Code, so it's got its own codified civil procedure. Federally, in terms of criminal law, it's one overarching thing. So, but I was in Quebec civil law with. I practiced in federal procedure, like bankruptcy or criminal law, which would have been federal. But although I never did criminal law, just to explain the system, you could be a civil lawyer in Quebec and still practice law in what is federal jurisdiction, but you couldn't practice in Ontario or the other provinces, which are common law. But I was probably never aware of it because I never cared much for it. You're just going in and doing your daily grind. But it's when you start getting edgy and when things start getting very political that you realize, holy crap, when you start getting ethics complaints for tweets when you're a practicing lawyer, and I knew that one of them actually came from a police officer up in Canada, then you realize, yeah, they use these licensure as a mechanism for suppressing free speech and controlling the ideology of the practice. At one point in time, they were in Ontario, at least they were talking about mandating basically a DEI affirmation for attorneys who employ people. I will undertake to employ a certain amount of equity, diversity, yada, yada, yada. It got shut down, but you see how they control or at least filter out the free thinkers, and you end up with a sort of ideologically captured practice: psychology, psychiatry, medicine, law. And this is how, through policy and through political pressure, they manage to create ideological uniformity in these professional fields.
How does Canada fit as an identity? And we have lots of discussion in the UK made up of four nations: Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. So we have our own identity issues within the UK. But you, again, the conversation of Indigenous communities, and then you've got the French stuff thrown in there. How does that fit in with a citizen in Canada saying they're Canadian? What exactly does that mean?
It's an well, historically, or I say historically, in my life, what it meant to be Canadian, uh, to some extent, people are saying now that there's a strong anti-American sentiment. There's always been an anti-American sentiment in Canada, to greater or lesser degrees, depending on what's going on in the world. When the war on terror, invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq was going on, I was fairly certain I was in Quebec City at that time, and there were a lot of protests against it, and the anti-American sentiment flared up there. It flares up and it goes down, but Canadians have sort of always defined themselves as not American, polite, subservient, not gun-toting, and I put that in quotes. But within Canada, it's true. Like, this whole joke about Canada being a 51st state, and some people think Trump is more or less serious about it. Like, I made the joke a while back. Well, it'll have to be the 52nd, 53rd, 54th, 56th state, because you got your maritime provinces, which have their own cultural identity, beautiful as it is, distinct from the rest of Canada. Then you've got Quebec. There's other French provinces, like New Brunswick is 50% French, 50% English. Quebec is 85% French, and it's distinct provinces, we call it in Canada. But it's got its own cultural identity, and one that wants to separate from the Federation. At least, it was very close, 50-50. The federal party out of Quebec is dedicated to removing itself from the Federation. So it's a separatist party at the federal level, which is ironic in and of itself. Then you got Ontario, which very liberal, and some people say between Ontario and Quebec, it controls the politics of the rest of Canada. Then you've got Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, which people regard as the Texas of Canada, which is its own cultural identity, utterly distinct from both the far west, British Columbia, and the east. And you got the Northwest Territories. Then you got British Columbia, which is the Portland, Oregon, or the Washington, the Seattle of Canada. In Victoria Island, they flew the menstrual equity flag just recently. Like that, it's woke beyond woke. So Canada itself has like 4 or 5 separate cultural identities at least. Then you have the indigenous communities, and so it's a multi varied identity as what it means to be Canadian, but sort of the underlying things of what it means to be Canadian historically, at least pre-COVID: polite, love thy neighbor, don't support firearm rights, and willing to suppress free speech in the name of politeness. And then come COVID, you realize that old expression, in the heart of every liberal is an aspiring tyrant. I screwed it up, but something along those lines. You realize that politeness and subservience to authority is actually neither polite nor good. And when people don't defer to that very authority, then the polite people who want people to defer to authority become very, very aggressive in their compelled subservience to authority.
I think the only time I've wanted to live in Canada was watching Ice Pilot, because I'm a plane buff. So watching Ice Pilot, which is up there in the Northwest Territories. Did you ever watch Ice Pilot?
No, I watched the what was the one that it was the Ice Truckers or the Road to
Ice
Hell?
Truckers, yeah.
I watched one of them. I mean, it's Canada. First of all, the people of every country are beautiful, and people of every country can be ugly. Geographically, most countries have beautiful elements to them. I don't know of any country that geographically is totally boring. Canada is amazing. I mean, you go from Newfoundland, which has some of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth and some of the most wonderful people on Earth, to British Columbia, which has some of the most beautiful mountains on Earth. Then you get in the middle of some of the most beautiful flatland on Earth.
And I live with the most beautiful swamplands on Earth.
Look, it's not the most varied. It's not the most varied geographically, but in terms of fauna, it's unbelievable. On one day, Peter, I saw otters eating fish, massive alligators, a snake. Then I saw an armadillo the next day. It's like the wildlife in Florida is beautiful, but it's flat and swampland. No, but Canada it's a beautiful country, and it has some beautiful people, and every country has some ugly people. But it's been taken over by. I say it's been taken over by the ugly politics, the ugly power-hungry people, and it's utterly destroying the country.
Tell me how you got involved in media. It's not a natural step from the legal profession.
No, so I once upon a time was famous for this video of a squirrel stealing a GoPro, carried it up a tree, ate the little piece of bread that I stuck to the GoPro, then dropped the GoPro, and then it was in 2014. I was practicing law, but not disillusioned. Just like I wasn't liking it, and I found this pastime, this hobby of you could make money licensing viral videos, or just making. I never knew you could make money from a video. That video, I made enough money to buy a drone. Then I bought it. With the drone, I started doing other videos, and I made more and more. And so I discovered the creative video aspect of the internet in 2014-ish. I had always been interested in photography, always been interested in videography. When I was in between high school and university, it's called CEGEP in Quebec. I studied creative arts, film, graphic arts, and I always loved it. And so when I discovered you could make some money with GoPros, 2014, I started making viral videos and using YouTube, but very much on the side while I was still practicing law, as sort of like a cathartic relief. And always worried about what I put out there, because I, get in front of a judge, and the judge is like, "Hey, Viva, I saw you wax your leg with a drone last week." And then then one sort of kept on going up. And I said at one point, I got to get out of the practice of law, because if I don't now, I never will. And I'll be a very, very miserable 50-year-old man if I don't have a heart attack before then. And so wound up the practice, left, and then discovered in about 2018, the internet was looking for mildly insightful legal analysis. I did the legal breakdown of Alex Jones's deposition in 2018. And I was like, oh, okay, the world wants this. I like it, can make money doing it, and I'm good at it. And that's how it took off. And then COVID hit, and then it was all just a different realm of the universe. People were stuck at home on the internet. and I was trying to make sense of the world without going crazy in it, and that's how it got started.
What about politics? Again, that's another interesting step. Why do you subject yourself to standing for a political party? Having done it many times, so I understand, but why?
Well, it's like it's a very interesting thing. You get to places by degrees. In 2016, I remember saying to someone on a YouTube video, "No politics here. It's just totally divisive." Then 2018 comes, and I realize, oh, you can't even be a legal analyst without being subjected to the politics. Because when I broke down that Alex Jones video, I started getting hate. I started getting censored on YouTube. Um, and then at one point, COVID hits, and I'm like, yeah, we can't escape politics. And like the old Greek expression, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean it won't take an interest in you. And some point during COVID, it became clear that the country that I thought I lived in and the people that I thought I knew were not necessarily what I thought they were. And it became clear to me that I was probably going to end up leaving, or at least trying to get out temporarily of Canada. And I said, I can't leave unless I make one last ditch effort to help. And so I made the joke. I said, I'm going to run for Canada before I run from Canada. Like, I never wanted to get into, who the hell wants to get into politics? It's a miserable, disgusting, filthy industry. And but I said, like, if I see myself leaving at some point, I won't feel as though I've done my best if I don't run and make my voice heard. So I ran for the People's Party of Canada, PPC. They're sort of, I call them libertarian or constitutionalist, because I don't consider the Conservatives to be conservative, and I don't consider myself to be conservative with a capital C. I don't even know what it means. I'm constitutionalist. I ran in a riding that has gone liberal by over 50% for the last 30 years. The last time it didn't go liberal was when Jack Layton ran for the NDP, and that was the only time in the last, 30 plus years. I ran against Mark Garneau, the astronaut who ended up getting elected, with 53% of the vote. And I ran, and I made my voice heard. I put out what I thought was my vision of Canada, and it got 1,500 votes in Westmount NDG. It got 3%, nationwide. And then at some point, it's like I said, I'm leaving passport, and we're demanding that children 13 years and up show this freaking QR code in order to play sports and go to libraries and go to coffee shops. And my daughter, who was not 13 at the time, but wouldn't have been, we weren't doing that to her anyhow, when she's being asked for this QR code to enter coffee shops, and when she sees her friends getting kicked off the soccer field because they're not vaxxed, I'm like, this is not a country that I want to be in right now. And I also, they were talking about laws to censor online content. It's like, I won't even be able to voice my opposition for much longer here. An opportunity arose in Florida with Rumble, took it, and I think I can be much more vocal here and have a normal life for the kids that I've brought onto this earth.
Well, the NDP, it's a weird idea. Maybe in the UK, it kind of fits with, we got the Conservatives and Labour, you've got the Conservatives and the Liberals, and then in the middle, not knowing what they are, we have the Liberal Democrats, and I guess you have the NDP. But how do they come about? How do they kind of make a name for themselves or put themselves forward to the electorate? Is it that we're not them or them, we're something different, but who knows what?
No, the NDP. Well, they got themselves on the map with Jack Layton, who was. I mean, I have to reassess everything I ever thought I knew of history. I thought he was a decent, good candidate at the time, and I think by all accounts he still is. He got the party name recognition, and he really stood for something, as far as I recall. The party right now is more progressive than the radical progressive Democrats in America. It's not something different. It's more radical than the liberals. And so, everybody says the two-party system is a broken system. It's a two-party system in Canada. It's just that you break up the two parties among 5 or 6 different parties. You got the so-called conservatives, who are more liberal than American Democrats to some extent, and then you get the liberals, and then you get the NDP, who are more liberal than the liberals. Then you got the Marxist Party, the Green Party. What's the other one? There's another small one in there. I forget what it is. So you have two parties. The NDP are more left than the liberals. And when I ran for office and I went door to door getting signatures, well, it's an amazing thing. People like everyone hated Justin Trudeau and everyone hated the liberals, and they thought their protest vote was going to be to vote for the NDP. I'm like, you're voting for someone policy-wise more left of the liberals, and dignity-wise more scoundrelous than the liberals. I mean, Jagmeet Singh has proven himself to be what a rat scoundrel that we all thought he was on steroids over the last 2 to 3 years. But no, that's who they are. They're more liberal progressive than the Democrats. They purport to stand for the people, labor, yada yada. They supported mandates. They supported all of these. They support endless taxation. And now you got Jagmeet Singh, who's been propping up the Liberals for the last 2 to 3 years, while simultaneously complaining about how the Liberals are destroying Canada. So there's very little viable political options or alternatives in Canada. The Conservatives, by all accounts, are the lesser of the evils, but they're conservatives who vote unanimously for conversion therapy bans, who basically they purport to fight censorship, but do a very half-assed job doing it. So hopefully they find a spine, and hopefully they also at least oust the Liberals in the next election if they ever call one.
It seems to be kind of a mirror position of what we have in the UK.
I mean, it's similar cultures and similar cultures and similar politeness and similar subservience to authority and deference to authority, and similar regarding ourselves as subjects and not individuals with God-given rights. And it's what distinguishes, I would say, the British entities from the American ones. The American ones broke off from that authoritarian regime, and Canada, the UK, Ireland seem very happy to be subjected to it, so long as it means some sort of ostensible security, even if it means you've given up all of your liberties.
Exactly. Can I ask you about the kind of options politically? Then I want to touch on your exodus to Florida, and then maybe we'll touch on some of the developments in Canadian politics with your new prime minister that sadly you gave to us and we give back to you. But with the People's Party of Canada, I mean, it seems as though since Stephen Harper lost that election in, what was it, 2015, that Canada have struggled to have a conservative voice. Maxime Bernier has stepped into that, but the PPC haven't achieved electoral success then. And Pierre, whose surname I can never pronounce, steps.
Poilievre.
That's the one. Thank you. I will ask you whenever I need to say that name in this podcast. But so he steps in and seems to be common sense, and then kind of pulls back on some things, and then you've got Carney back in again, reclaiming or grabbing the reins. But I mean, you kind of wonder why in the political landscape with a horrendous individual like Trudeau, why nothing has happened to spring up to actually challenge that in terms of a conservative ideology.
Well, it's a tough one because even conservatives in Canada are still demonized by the media as being sort of like MAGA Republicans in America. Now, and I'm saying this was even before the term MAGA existed. Conservatives were always demonized as being like the antiquated, old school, anti-women's rights in Canada. And branding is a hell of a drug, especially when the media is controlled by the very party that's financing them, that wants to stay in power forever. So, everybody knows this, but the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Radio-Canada, they are funded to the tune of like $1 billion+ a year. It's under a federal statute, true. The only thing is that, you got one government that's been in power for 10 years that's been bailing them out, propping them up, and promising more financing, as opposed to the other party, which hasn't been in power, which promises to defund them. And so you get the media totally captured, demonizing the conservative side of things. And so it's almost impossible to have a fair perspective from the general population because they are inundated with absolute anti-conservative propaganda day in and day out. It doesn't help that the leader of the Conservative Party now doesn't seem to have much of a political backbone, and seems to be very much of a fair weather politician for good and for bad. But so there hasn't been a conservative uprising in Canada. On the one hand, I don't think there's the appetite for that, even among most conservatives. And it's true, Maxime Bernier and the PPC haven't had any breakout success, but they've had 2 federal elections. And once you understand how the media works, when I ran in 2021, it was their second federal election, you had to struggle even to get interviews with state-funded media. And then I did an interview with CBC where I think they thought it was going to be something of I was going to look stupid. And when the interview didn't come out that way and I didn't look stupid, it was aired live at 7 a.m. when I think about 300 people were listening to it. And then I'm like, hey guys, when are you going to put it up on your website? Because the election is on Monday. And so for the rest of the week, I'm like, hey guys, where's the interview? You've updated your website. put the interview, give it to me, I'll publish it. And then they finally upload it the day before the vote, and you realize like exactly how dirty it is in terms of media control, media which is indebted to the Liberal government and does everything it can to not give exposure to the opposing parties. Maxime Bernier didn't get invited to the debates despite qualifying, as far as I recall, under the criteria. And it's that form of capture. But the Conservatives don't fight dirty, and I say dirty not in a politically negative sense, but they don't fight vocally. They don't define themselves as being the opposite of the Liberals. They almost try to placate in order to steal some of the Liberal votes, which I think is a terrible losing strategy, because you ultimately end up thinking that there's no real options in Canada. And the PPC, in as much as they're principled and have a leader who will stick to principled political positions, even if they're not popular, like the equalization payments, like, questioning equalization payments, where he's from an area in Quebec that loves equalization payments. It makes for the political situation that we have right now, which is the lesser of the evils, and just hoping now that the lesser of the evils can somehow break through in the next election if they call it.
I want to hear about your flight to the US. It's interesting because I had a friend who she went from Toronto down to Naples, which I know well because that's where I got my pilot's license. So spent a good month there back in the days. But you went from Canada down to Florida, and you mentioned with Rumble. Kind of how did that come about? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, it was that was a long transition of a journey as well, because none of us ever thought we'd be here now, like in this world. It became clear to me during COVID that Canada was not in the right direction of any place where I'd ever want to stay. And then my wife had the same revelation when she went to our kids' play, and kids were doing the annual play with face masks, and our daughter had just gotten berated for not showing a QR code, and then she flipped. And then the opportunity arose. We were looking at other ways to, temporarily leave. With there's a variety of ways that you can do it. You have to apply for visas, and some of them are not intuitive or guarantees. An opportunity arose with Rumble. I was like, okay, well, let's do this now. And so I ended up here. It's interesting on Twitter. I've been, maybe should not be engaging in these types of disagreements or fights, but there are people who are resentful of the fact that I've done it, and I can understand why. I think a lot of people would want to, if given the opportunity, and not everybody has the opportunity, and it's a massive expense. Also, like, if I had known then what I knew now, we might not have even tried to do it in the first place, because I would have realized how stupid it was. But like, you see, when you see it from the outside and you go back periodically, you understand it's collective madness what's going on in Canada. You cross the border, and I make the joke all the time, it's like stepping into an insane asylum. And there are good, free, peace-loving, freedom-loving Canadians out there, but you get to the cities, and they are the vast minority. And the people in Canada, in the cities, in the government, controlled Ottawas, they like it, and they don't seem to think there's a problem, and they still think that this capital F freedom word is a rallying call of the far right. I mean, that's what Canadians, some of them, still believe, and no, it's because of the CBC literally putting out articles saying the Canadian flag during the trucker protest is a far right sign of whatever fascism. The word freedom is a far right call, dog whistle. And then all of a sudden, when the Liberals decide to take pride in the Canadian flag to fight the terrorists, then all of a sudden they get to do it. But and they do it for the totally wrong, counterintuitive reasons. But I mean, that's what it's it. I was pushed out. There was no way to stay there and continue financing my oppressors. Like, you pay 50 cents of every dollar you earn to a government that brutalizes you, tyrannizes you, and terrorizes you. And why on earth would anyone who has the option continue to do that? People say stay and fight. First of all, I can fight more effectively from down here, because I don't have to worry about them freezing my bank accounts if they don't like the fact that I donated to the trucker convoy. And I'm not going to finance my brutalizers with 50 cents every dollar that I go out there and work hard to make.
No, exactly. And I understand someone like Calvin Robinson going to the US, having fought the battle in the UK, and realizing that maybe it's more possible to fight the battle for freedom from the US than it is from the UK. So completely understand. It's kind of like an oxymoron, if you can say that, having a company like Rumble, which has now become the video option to YouTube, It's grown, it's been hugely effective, and yet it's Canadian. And it's like it's so strange the way things are thrown up and develop in a way that maybe you wouldn't expect, and to have the main free speech alternative to YouTube actually being Canadian based is intriguing.
Can you? Well, first of all, I've known Rumble for they have their U.S. operations in America as well. I've known Rumble for a decade. Like you can go back and see. There's a video. I think they called it like "Super Cool Dad Does Fun Trick," and I'm at the park and I push my kid on a swing and then jump under it and lie on the ground. This was 10 years ago, and can you
That's
imagine
how
like
you made it. Go to the park, push
oh,
your
no,
kid in the swing.
the stupid a squirrel catching a fish on a drone. What was the other one? Pulling my kid's tooth out with a drone. Weird ways to find freedom in the world. But like Chris Pavlovsky, a nice, polite Canadian dude from Ontario, has now become one of the two biggest voices for freedom of speech and ensuring that government overreach doesn't suppress our ability to communicate. The other one being Elon Musk. What a world! I mean, I messaged him and it was like, could you imagine that you would have been public enemy number one, where Brazil is going after you, France is going after you, the EU is going after you. Just a nice, polite guy who from Canada who wanted to, make a video hosting platform. But it's a wild transition. It's almost surreal at times. There's an element of guilt, and I'm my toughest critic. I know what I think and fear sometimes, and I know what I feel sometimes. I don't need trolls on the internet to say it, but to come down here with the opportunity that I had and to amplify the madness that is going on in Canada, I think it's a very effective way of trying to wake up the nation of Canada from the government slumber that they've fallen into. And in the meantime, it is fun just to follow what's going on in the rest of the world and to be deeply involved in American politics as well, which is the leading the rest of the world. Like the rest of the world will follow by example at some point in time. And so you need, on the one hand, you need to be able to fight. You need to be able to fight freely. It's no good staying in New York State and getting locked up, or going to Seattle and I'll sit here and fight, and then you end up getting locked away for 4 years because you mean tweets. So you strategically not recoil, but you strategically go to the place where you can fight the battle. And when freedom thrives in America, it thrives elsewhere in the world. Had Kamala Harris won this election, Lord knows what the rest of the world would look like and what example they would be following right now.
100% agree. And Florida and think Texas have become the bastions, the center points of free speech. I would personally prefer Florida because it's not as swampy and buggy as Florida. But
you'd prefer Texas.
I would turn Texas over
no,
Florida.
You said Florida, but no, go to Texas.
Texas, yes.
Go to Texas in the summer. Holy heck, is it? It's like a dry sauna hot. Texas is amazing. We were torn between Texas, Tennessee, New Hampshire, and Florida. Culturally, geographically, Florida's easy to get to. Texas was wicked hot. It's a massive, massive state. I drove once from. Hey, say it again.
Like Florida isn't.
Florida's amazing also.
With bugs everywhere, flying cockroaches everywhere.
It's look, we've got iguanas in the garage, snakes, alligators in the backyard. I say like Florida's continental Australia in America. Texas is beautiful as well, but I prefer Florida. The fishing is great here as well. But I know it's the journey of life is weird. I never in a million years would have ever thought I'd be here at this point in time, but there's decisions you make and there's directions that you get pushed in unwillingly or at least unpredictably, and this was one of them.
What's it like to be a Canadian in the center of what's happening? Because when you made the move, there was no foregone conclusion. I don't even know whether how much Trump was in the mix back years ago, but you now end up in the center of a battle for free speech worldwide. It's a fascinating position to be in, not only in terms of the politics, but in terms of the media that you have. How does that feel as a Canadian being in that fight in the US?
It's I may have discovered my American spirit, and there's I've said also like there's a sort of self-fulfilling, not prophecy, but in science there's a term for it where it's not like some sort of self-fulfilling bias, basically, where The types of people who move to America, given America's reputation, have a certain attitude. The types of people who move to Canada, given Canada's reputation, have a certain attitude. So I might have always been somewhat American at heart in what I think is the spirit of America, which is defiance of authority, preference of a risky freedom as opposed to a secure prison. So how does it feel? It's amazing to have found what I like, what the world needs, what I can do, and what I can make a living doing is an amazing thing that not everybody has the good fortune of finding. It's the old expression: if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. It's endless stress on the one hand, and there's an element of fear in it as well, because you never know what happens. Like someone can come into power in 2028 and say, "Oh, Viva interviewed Enrique Tarrio. He's now public enemy number one." Our government in Canada might say the same thing, but it's an honor and it's also an obligation, because not everybody gets to do it. Not everybody has the luxury of being able to tweet what they want without worrying about their boss firing them. And so, on the one hand, I've become unemployable, and on the other hand, I've become unemployable, which brings with it a certain amount of freedom. I don't have to worry about a boss coming down on me, and I can do what I think is right, regardless of what might have otherwise been the social, economic, employment pressures to keep my mouth shut and just get along to get along.
When you sit down over a long, stiff drink, how do you kind of define what you stand for? Is it from a position of um, religious freedom? Is it a position of right and left? Is it a position of just purely on free speech? How do you kind of decide what do I stand for exactly?
I mean, it's definitely not right or left, and it's definitely not religious. I can exclude those. I mean, but maybe some people are going to say it's natural justice. It's just whatever what I believe is right after having thought it through and heard both sides. I mean, it's like you can always say, like, I can understand some regulations on certain issues. I can understand some limitation. Nobody likes being berated or harassed on the internet. But then the flip side is, well, what's the alternative? That you outlaw that you prevent people from doing that. First of all, if you don't like it, don't jump into it. If you don't like cold water, don't go swimming in it. But how do I decide? It's what I believe to be proper and what I believe to be fair, and it's not a left or right issue. I think it's really just understanding that you can't trust the government ever, period, full stop, and you never will be able to. But you need a certain amount of government in life just to make sure that there's not total chaos. And so you marry those two things together, and then you say, okay, fine, as little government as humanly possible. And when they start overstepping their bounds and ruling over you like a subject, then you've got a problem.
Let me circle back to Canada as we come to an end. You've got Mark Carney there. We had him for 8 years, as I mentioned, in the Bank of England, and he's kind of positioned himself and maybe lauded even from the UK press as some economic great figure. And that's probably what he's going to use for Canada. But he's taken over from Trudeau. I mean, is he an improvement or not really over Trudeau?
How much time do we have left? I'll go on a 10-minute tirade. He is not an improvement. He is, in fact, worse than Trudeau. Many people, like, we all got familiar with Mark Carney because many of us didn't really know him, and a lot of us didn't know him, period. I knew of the name, and I've done, now my thorough due diligence in order to expose him for what he is, which is a WEF globalist shill, a whore of the highest order. Like, people that never heard of him didn't know that he was basically backseat advising Trudeau for the last 5 years, that he's got 3 passports: Canada, England, Ireland. I don't care how he gets his Irish passport through his British passport. This man is a globalist who has been serving the interests of not a populist Europe, but of a globalist EU Europe for the last decade. He spent the better part of the last decade living in England, not in Canada. And he's anointed as prime minister with people don't even know how this happened. When Trudeau resigned, and he says, I announced my intention to resign after I am replaced following a robust national leadership race. And then they handplucked this guy that nobody knows. And they know that nobody knows him, even though he's been the puppeteer in the backdrop to some extent. He himself is another puppet of the bigger puppeteers. He's been advising Trudeau. He's a globalist. He comes in, he's soft-spoken, he's got a political demeanor, and he's not Justin Trudeau. He's not Chrystia Freeland. He's not Karina Gould. All of these people are tainted, toxic people. I mean, when you pose with a literal Nazi like Karina Gould did, when you pose with literal Nazi flags like Chrystia Freeland did, these are tainted people. Plop in somebody who's liberal, who looks nice, who speaks nice, who nobody knows, and he's already better off than the three options that you had. He got 85, or maybe between 85 and 90% of the vote of registered liberals. Nobody knows that the registered liberals, according to their rules, could be anybody who doesn't need to be a citizen, could be a permanent resident, 14 years and older. So we don't know how it happened. We just know that they had apparently 400,000 applicants, registered liberal applicants, and they only accepted 152,000 of those votes. For whatever the reason, don't know. You could have had however many 14 to 18-year-olds who just decided the next prime minister of Canada in a purely internal rules-based replacement, anointment. This is like Kamala Harris 2.0 of Canada. Mark Carney is a pure globalist. He was anti-Brexit. He's an anti-populist. He's a WEF Davos Bilderberg frequenting member, whatever you want to call that. He's given speeches at Davos alongside Bill Gates. He's attended meetings at Bilderberg along Albert Bourla, and he has been hand-selected to be the next prime minister of Canada. They say that better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And in this case, this guy's worse than Justin Trudeau because he has been guiding Justin Trudeau, and he might be a little bit more politically savvy not to do the stupid stuff that Justin Trudeau did. But it's an anointment, it's a political replacement, and it's far, quite close to the nail in the coffin of Canada. Because if this guy actually wins the next election, my goodness, I mean, I don't know, it's done. Setting aside the fact that the Canadian government, the Liberal government, and to some extent the Conservatives have already been infiltrated by Chinese influence, by Indian influence, a known fact that's been going on for about the decade of Justin Trudeau's rule. And now you just got some guy who has no particular affiliation to Canada other than the fact that he was born there, has been serving the interests of globalists in Europe and the European Union for the last decade, just coming in. And now Canada is his for the taking. And we'll see if and when he calls a national election. I'm jokingly needling him on Twitter saying, hey, when are you going to call an election? When are you going to call an election? The Canadian media says he's being coy about whether or not he's going to immediately call an election because nobody elected him except 152,000 registered liberals. So Canada has been captured. And the only question is, can it escape? And from what I'm seeing, I'm skeptical. I'm a little despaired, but I will keep putting it on blast as much as I still have a voice that is accessible in Canada to Canadians.
And the concern is, he has a huge honeymoon period that takes him past the election, and the media embrace him. And I've seen Pierre Appleton Pulver. That's Pierre Apple. I don't know, but he obviously he didn't want to go up against Mark Carney because Trudeau has shown his utter failure of the country, and the public were beginning to see that. And then quickly they swap him out for someone else, hoping then that he will win the election. And I wonder, even will the media actually give a fair election to all the candidates, or is Carney the selected new prime minister?
Well, I mean, here's the question: why would they? The Pierre Poilievre has announced his intention to defund the CBC. The Liberals have announced their intention to double the budget for the CBC. Who do you think the media is going to? I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, who does one think the media is going to prefer in this, as far as they're concerned, existential election for their own future? I mean, and just to highlight one element of the absolute absurdity, we're all familiar with 1984 and the scene when I forget who's giving the speech. And in the middle of the speech, they come in and they hand him a new piece of paper. And he says, we've always been at war with East Asia. And they look around like, oh my goodness, the banners are all wrong. It's sabotage, they said. Carney comes into power. And the first thing he does, whether or not he even has the lawful authority to do it, is to drop to zero the carbon tax on consumers. The carbon tax was a Liberal policy in 2018, 2019. So the Liberals come in and solve the problem by undoing at least a portion of the problem that the Liberals themselves implemented legislatively in 2018, 2019. That's how absolutely politically insane it is in Canada. And you're going to have some people who are going to say, good for him, pro. And he does it by way of what looks like an executive order, like what Trump was doing, signing a piece of paper. Lord knows if he even has the authority to do it by way of order in council. And he doesn't even undo the consumer portion of the carbon tax. He just reduces the rate to zero so that now Canadians are not going to get taxed when they buy gas and when they heat their homes. So it's just like, and what's enraging is that I know plenty of Canadians who don't seem to care and who almost are buying into this propaganda. And I don't know how hard they have to be slapped, metaphorically speaking, or have a cold glass of water thrown in their face before they wake up from this slumber of their own destruction.
Very hard, I think, is the answer to that. But can I finish off on the latest story that that Carney, instead of deciding to go south of the border to actually visit President Trump, he goes off to he goes off to not Canada, he goes off to
France.
France to visit Macron, who is the weakest of the weak in terms of leadership in Europe. Um, how does that work out? Why do you not strengthen ties with your biggest trade partner, or is this just political posturing, saying actually he hates Trump and will embrace anyone but Trump?
Well, I mean, it reveals that he is a globalist hooer. I mean, he's going to Europe to meet with Macron, going to England to meet with whomever. These are two countries which are literally supporting censorship to censorship for the purposes of concealing the failed policies of their governments. Macron talking about cutting video of riots because people are rioting as a result of their horrible failed immigration policy, not much different than the UK. So this guy's aligning himself with the tyrannical forces of Europe. Right after Chrystia Freeland, in the context of these liberal debates, was putting out video clips, to the effect that we need to ally ourselves more with Europe, nuclear armed Europe, in order to fight Trump tariffs. You're dealing with political idiots who are going for the cheap virtue signaling points. And it's very popular in Canada right now to hate Trump. And so meeting with him, will be ill received by the politically naive Canadians. It will be demonized in perpetuity by the liberal funded media. So this is just the easy way of not addressing a problem and looking like you're doing something. Let's go to Europe and talk to the Europeans. I mean, he spent a decade there. Has he not had enough discussion with the Europeans? No, let's go meet with the European Union, a force that has become more tyrannical than the Putins of the world, locking people up for free speech, censoring the internet, cutting off Rumble in France or at least preventing them from operating in France. Let's go meet with them because that represents Canadian values.
Viva, I could touch for a lot longer. It's fascinating what's happening in Canada and the position you have there, speaking truth. From Florida. I think the only prediction I will make is that you'll do less videos in your car by the time the summer hits because it'll be too hot and you'll have beads of sweat on you in your car.
I got a Bronco. They're talking about things that you could never have envisioned in the world. I never thought I'd look like this. I mean, this is what I looked like when I was 20 in terms of long hair and hippiness. We got a Bronco. I took the doors off the Bronco, top down. I'm driving down to the studio in Miami. Like, never in a million years would I ever have imagined myself being in Florida. Like, growing up in Canada, we come down to Florida occasionally, and it was a weird place. Like, architecturally, it's weird. Geographically, it's weird. It's America when we're raised in Canada. Like, America's it's weird. I mean, it's weird. It was totally unpredictable, totally unforeseeable. But I say not a privilege in a pretentious sense, to have the ability, the opportunity to get on the biggest platforms in America and put on blast what's going on in Canada. It was on Steve Bannon last week, putting them on blast. I go on, Alex Jones Infowars. To be able to do that is fantastic. The frustrating part is it doesn't seem like enough Canadians are waking up to it and fast enough. And by the time they wake up, if ever, they'll be beyond the point of no return, in which case they're going to have to rationalize away to themselves what they've sacrificed for this protective freedom that the government provides.
Chipping away and giving the audience information and the other side of the mainstream legacy media argument. And you're certainly doing a key role in that. Viva, thank you so much for your time. I know you've got a lot on, and really appreciate you giving us your thoughts on what's happening, giving us your background, which often you don't get, but also the political focus in Canada. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.